Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is Sarah Jones with Politicus Radio, joining me to talk about tonight's primaries in Michigan and Mississippi, where both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump look to have big leads, but both are being pressured in Michigan, is Politicus USA's editor-in-chief, Jason Easley. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Michigan and Mississippi will decide if Hillary Clinton will hold off Bernie Sanders, while Republicans have to be crossing their fingers that Donald Trump has begun to slide. Governor John Kasich of Ohio is trying to carve out a piece of Michigan for himself tonight, as it's his neighboring state, and Senator Bernie Sanders showed at the Democratic debate and town hall that he is taking Hillary Clinton on with his anti-free trade stance in Michigan, whereas Clinton accused Sanders of voting against the auto bailout, which is a big deal in Michigan and certainly contributed to Mitt Romney losing his home state in 2012. Clinton was polling about 20 points ahead of Sanders in Michigan, but recent polls show that lead has narrowed a little bit to about 11 and then 17 points in two different polls. Trump is still polling 18 points ahead of both Cruz and Kasich in Michigan, with Senator Marco Rubio bringing up the rear, as he seems to be doing in a lot of these primaries in recent polling. Trump is also polling big in Mississippi, as is Hillary Clinton. So, Jason, tell us, what can we expect tonight? What should we be looking out for?
Tonight could be a really, really fast night, or it could be very interesting. In Michigan, it really does appear like Hillary Clinton's double-digit lead hasn't been sufficiently punctured. But some of the exit polling suggested that the voters that did come out to vote tonight were agreeing with Senator Sanders, especially on trade deals, by overwhelming margins. What the fascinating thing is, and this has sort of been the harbinger for all the exit polls on the Democratic side, the big question is, do you want to continue President Obama's policies, or do you want something more liberal? Whenever the electorate has said they want something more liberal, that's usually bode well for Bernie Sanders. But tonight in Michigan, according to the NBC News exit poll, 52% of those surveyed wanted to continue President Obama's policies, while 29% wanted more liberal policies and 13% wanted less liberal policies. I don't know who that 13% who want less liberal policies are, but they felt that way. So that's usually a really good sign for Hillary Clinton. The bigger that continue Obama's policies is, usually the bigger her percentage of the vote. In Mississippi, a lot of people think Mississippi's a foregone conclusion. Senator Sanders really hasn't done much of anything there in quite a while. He's pretty much, it looks like, written it off. Hillary Clinton's going to win big there. As you pointed out, on the Republican side, there's been some signs that Donald Trump might be slipping a bit in Michigan. But, he's pretty much poised for a decent win. The big question will be who's going to be number 2 in that state. Does Ted Cruz keep the momentum going as the anti-Trump? Or does John Kasich jump up and start to make the case for being the establishment candidate? Marco Rubio looks, sounds, feels like a lost cause in both of these states. It would be somewhat of a minor miracle if Rubio was able to pull anything off tonight beyond a third-place finish.
Neil Bush joined Ted Cruz's campaign today, and Cruz said about Rubio and Kasich, neither one of them can get to 1237. I don't know that Ted Cruz can either, so it was a weird thing for him to say, right? That's just, he's not leading.
Odd, yes.
Trump is 84 delegates ahead of Cruz right now. So it's interesting that with Neil Bush joining Ted Cruz's campaign, it signals that Ted Cruz is the next establishment choice, which is very strange given that within the Republican Party he is universally loathed. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I would also wonder if that's also not quite a Texas thing, with the Bushes and Cruz and I do believe that we've reached the point of desperation now where the Republican Party's looking around and they see Ted Cruz and they're like, if Trump is the three-headed monster in the corner who's looking like he's ready to basically go on a rampage and destroy everything, and Ted Cruz is the two-headed monster who may leave something left standing, they're leaning towards the two-headed monster right now.
That's what it looked like to me. I mean, they're getting behind the guy that they all hate. So when you do that, you're pretty desperate. That's sort of your last move.
Cruz looks like the guy they not only that they hate. I don't think they hate Cruz as much as they hate Trump, but I think they trust Cruz a little more than they trust Trump. They do not trust Trump at all.
Well, I don't know if it's about trust. Let's take it apart, because I think it's more about what's going to ruin their party. I mean, Ted Cruz isn't to be trusted. He's had that fake filibuster business that he's done, and he hasn't really done much of any good except ruin the Senate. So, although maybe that's something they trust him with, I don't know, but it wasn't good for their brand. But then he's a lot better for their brand than Donald Trump.
By trust, what the Republicans meant, I read a lot of quotes from these Republicans who were making the argument for Cruz. What they meant was they know what Cruz is about.
Right, that makes sense.
They trust that they understand where Cruz is coming from and what he's about. There's a certain consistency in Ted Cruz's egomaniacal, self-serving behavior that they can trust that this is how Cruz is going to behave. With Trump, he is all over the place, and they have no idea what he's going to do from one moment to the next. And they don't want to be a part of that. They just think, and honestly, you're right. They think Trump is more destructive than Cruz. They think Trump could possibly cost them the House.
Well, they can't. Oh, that's an interesting point. And they can't control Donald Trump. He has less money than he claimed he had, but he has, as we found out today from an article that you wrote. But he has. Doesn't rely on party money the way that the other candidates do. Tell me a little bit about their fear of losing the House. So that's huge, because the House wasn't up. We all thought it was going to take many, many cycles to even even it up due to the gerrymandering. So what are your thoughts on that?
There is a line of thought among some nervous Republicans that watch the House that Trump could be so catastrophic that he could cost the Republicans the inroads they've made in Illinois, Connecticut, Maine. There's been several states, maybe not Connecticut, I have to get the list out, but there's been several states that they've made inroads in the last few election cycles. And they're afraid that Trump's not only going to reverse all that, but he's going to endanger incumbents all over the country with a kind of negative down ballot effect, almost like a plague. They're afraid Trump is going to define the whole party, every candidate up and down the ballot, and he's going to make every Republican toxic in 2016.
The Trump plague.
The Trump plague, yes. That's really their fear. I think the odds are really remote that Democrats could pick up enough seats to win the House, but could Democrats win a bunch, and I mean a bunch of seats, like more than anyone was ever expecting, and cut Paul Ryan's majority down from, I can do whatever I want, to, wait a minute, I got to make sure I have the votes for this.
Well, he doesn't have the votes for anything now, but that's not the fault of the Democrats, is it? It's within his own party.
The difference is, with Ryan wanting to make deals, especially on tax reform, he's dying to do tax reform. If he had a smaller majority, you would see a much different tax reform package out of the House. If Hillary Clinton was president and he had a smaller majority in the Democratic Senate, than you would if a Republican was president and Republicans controlled the Congress.
It's worth reiterating, because you were talking about the exit polling and some people wanting more liberal policies. And it's worth reiterating again that one of the reasons we don't have some of the policies that liberals would like to see isn't because President Obama isn't liberal enough. It's because there's a Congress that trolls every idea he's put forth. And until that changes, it doesn't matter who the president is. I mean, it does matter everybody should vote, but the point is that person isn't going to be able to unilaterally make decisions. So even if Bernie Sanders, who I would say is the most liberal candidate out there right now, were the president, he still could not get things done that President Obama couldn't get done. It's just not possible. Look what's happening with the closure of Gitmo. It's just you keep coming up against the same thing.
Yeah, it's not so much a matter of, because to be honest, from a political science and public policy point of view, in some occasions and several occasions, conservative policies fit. There are conservative policies that can fit an occasion. There are liberal policies that can fit an occasion. There's no one-size-fits-all. Liberal ideology is right all the time, or conservative ideology is right all the time, which is kind of what we've gotten ourselves into with the degree of partisanship in this country. So it's an either-or, black and white, zero-sum game. But you're right. We can't move forward and select a president based on, liberal, which means everything's going to be liberal, because as we've seen through almost 8 years of President Obama, that is not the way it works. It's never going to work that way unless there's some sort of dramatic shift, and Senate Democrats would get 60 votes and the House majority.
And I would like to see more liberals in office, definitely. But I also think that this is a country of moderation. It always has been. That's how it's supposed to operate. What you see happening to the Republican Party right now, because of their extremism, is something liberals need to guard against as they start to get more power. And they will, because due to, if Republicans keep this up, definitely liberals will have more power. And the thing to do with having more power is to be careful with it and to have those discussions and those debates that are open and public about which policy is best. And sometimes compromise is the way you do that. And it isn't that, we have to do the lesser of two evils. That's not what I'm trying to sell. But everyone in the ideologies as they are supposed to operate both have good points. Right now, I can't say that conservatives are bringing good points to the table, but I also have been making the argument for a long time that the current Republican Party isn't conservative. In fact, they are radicals, and they're not pushing anything that's conservative. They call it conservative, but it isn't conservative at all.
They're radical reactionaries.
Reactionaries, and they're corporatists, which is also not... when you look at conservative ideology, while yes, it does lend itself to corporatism, it isn't supposed to be the cheerleader of, no responsibility. The corporate actors are supposed to be good members of society. That was the old thinking, and we don't see that anymore. So I don't think it's fair even to real conservatism. That's not what we're seeing right now to call this that, but that's what they're calling it, and that's what it's become.
One of the interesting things to watch tonight as the results come in will be margins. Will be how big, if Clinton beats Sanders in Michigan, how big is the margin of victory? Is it less than 10 points? Is it closer to 20? Especially on the Republican side, that margin is critical, because Donald Trump is going to be looking to reassert his momentum. So if it turns out that a John Kasich or a Ted Cruz has cut into Trump's margin and Trump doesn't win by a whole lot and he looks beatable, that's going to rally the forces that are trying to stop Trump, even if he wins. In Mississippi, I was just looking at some more exit polling. The electorate in Mississippi is up. The very conservative electorate is up 8 points from 2012. The evangelical turnout looks to be down 4 points, which you would assume be bad news for Ted Cruz. The increased conservatism is probably good news for Donald Trump. And Marco Rubio and John Kasich they don't fit anywhere on this map. Only 17% of the electorate and Republican electorate in Mississippi is moderate or liberal. And the percentage of evangelical voters, they're not going to go for Rubio or Kasich. I think it's already been determined that Rubio is not going to get the support of the evangelicals, who are splitting between Trump and Cruz. So this looks like in Mississippi, Donald Trump kind of win. Possibly pretty big.
Yeah.
And
that's going to be brutal.
And like I said, for the Democrats, Mississippi's sort of been taken as a foregone conclusion for quite a while that Hillary Clinton's going to continue her southern sweep.
It's interesting, going back to Michigan for a moment, just to look at Michigan as what the Democratic Party represents there. And the Democratic Party is a big tent right now, and in the Midwest represents a lot of union workers. And not that it doesn't throughout the country, but I'm saying that's very big in the Midwest. It's one of the big draws. And there's a lot of union issues in Michigan after Governor Snyder has done his best to damage unions, especially the teachers union in the state. So it's going to be interesting to see how this turnout, what it says about union workers turning out to vote, and what it says about the strength of that faction of the Democratic Party, I think.
Yeah, and it really does depend on, it really is going to tell us a lot about where they go. Because, Bernie Sanders has pushed really hard with the unionist message on trade agreements, and he's really went after Clinton hard on free trade.